So yeah, that's me. I work at Enrise. I've been working there for almost 6 years now. We have a great team. We build mobile apps with Laravel as a backend most of the time, and React Native as the front end. So that's what I'm doing in my normal life. And in my free time, I'm doing a lot of Laracast, but I'm also doing Meetup, so that's why I'm here today. So what are we talking about today? Of course, it's caching. And we will only talk about caching in Laravel itself, so we're not talking about other stuff. So we will talk about how to put something in the cache, how to retrieve it, how to remove it from the cache, and how you can work with that cache, and so on. So we're not talking about browser caching. That's a completely different subject. And also other parts like what's it called? Other tools like external tools that can cache your website or and so on. So we're not talking about that. And also not about cache control headers. Those things we're not going to talk about today. So it's a whole different subject. We're not talking about asset caching as well. That's a different thing. That's also part of Laravel. Laravel has tools for that called Laravel Mix, and it has caching built into it. So you can make your files being cached as well, like your CSS and JavaScript files. And we're not talking about configuration caching, and you can already do that by just running php-artisan config cache, and it will store it on the server. And it will load it a little bit faster than if you read it out from the files all the time. So we have done that. And we're not talking about caching with an S. That's also a different subject. You should probably watch a TED Talk or something. That will probably help you with that. So if I make a spelling mistake, if there's an S somewhere, just know we're talking about the caching thing and not caching with an S. So what is caching? Caching is basically a way to store your data on a place so you can access it faster. That's basically the idea behind caching. So caching helps you prevent to use unnecessary resources or do unnecessary calculations, and that's what it's all about. So you want to do something, store it somewhere so you can access it faster a second time, so you don't have to redo everything all the time. And you can store it anywhere. You can store it in a file, in a database, in Redis. Different kinds, it doesn't really matter. So let's dive into the basics of caching in Laravel, and I will just go through this quickly and then open up the editor and see how far we get today. So we can put stuff inside the cache. So let's say we have this data array and we want to put it in the cache for 60 seconds. Then Laravel has a really nice way to do it using the facade. You just say cache put, you give it a name, you put the data in, and then the time, and that's it. Or in this case, it's just the data, and then it will cache it forever. And if you put in the time as well, then it will put it in there for that given time, so it will expire. For the first one, if you don't give a time, it will give basically the amount of seconds that it will never expire. It will expire in like 50 years or something. At that point, your server will probably already be destroyed. It will basically be cached forever. So that's the basic way of putting something in the cache. And Laravel also makes it really easy to pass in a carbon object. And a carbon object is basically a datetime object on steroids. So it has a lot of extra methods, extra syntactical sugar. So in this case, we can say we want the current time plus the amount of seconds and put it in there. So Laravel will then check, is this the carbon instance? Yes, then it will do a diff with the current time and store that amount of seconds. And the put method will return true or false if it was succeeded or not. It's mostly true, of course. So these are all the methods together. So retrieving something from the cache is really easy. You just do get and then give the given name. And it will return something or it will return null. And in this case, you also have an extra option. So you can pass in a default value. So if there is no option available inside Laravel or inside your cache, then you just return an array. In this case, by default, it's returning null. And there's also this has method, so you can check if the key exists or not. So these are very easy ways to check if something exists inside the cache. Okay, now there are different ways of putting something inside the cache. But you can also use a callback. And that's why we have the remember method. So the remember method basically works the same as put, but instead of passing in an object or an array of data, you pass in a function. And in that function, you can perform your action. So you don't have to do the action above, assign it to a variable, and then put it inside the put method. And remember basically does all of that for you. And it's just a little bit of a nicer syntax in Laravel, I guess. But it works really good. And there's also this remember forever. It's basically the put method without the seconds. So that's basically remember forever. But I think this reads a little bit better than put without seconds. You have to think about what's doing put behind the scenes. And with remember forever, it's just really clear it's going to remember it forever. So although it's an extra method that's basically doing the same thing as the previous methods, it's a lot more readable. And you have this way of putting in a callback. So that makes it also really easy to work with. Okay, we can also increment and decrement caches. So you can put something in the cache, for example a counter, and then increment it every time. So you can add 1 to it. So if you run this every time, it will increment the cache. It's basically just a counter inside the storage. You can increment it with a different number. That's the basic idea. And the default amount is of course 1, so it will always increase by 1. And you can I think this should be decrement. It says increment, but it should be decrement. But it will decrement the number and so on. So it's a basic principle of getting the value from the cache, do it -1 or minus the number that you pass in, and then put it back in the cache. That's basically what's happening here. Okay, so now we also have a way of putting getting something from the cache and forgetting about it, or just forget about it at all. So if you put something inside the cache, in this case, we just put a string in there. If we pull it, then you get the value back, but it will be removed from the cache. So basically, it stores the value, removes it, and then returns it inside that method. So if we now get it again, it will be null. And we also have this forget method, and forget basically just forgets it from the storage, and then it will be gone. You can also remove something from the cache by giving it a negative time or a negative number of seconds. So if you put carbon now sub 1 day, then it will be invalid, of course, because it's not a valid time anymore. So this way you can also remove something from the cache. I actually never really used this way, but I can imagine if you have something like a database record that's, if you deploy your server and you're gonna rebuild your whole cache from the database server, then you can use this method from the datetime that's in the database, for example, to put something in the cache or not, or remove it automatically. I would probably just do a check beforehand on the date, but yeah, there are ways to use this as well. You don't always have this luxury that you can do that. And then we also have something called tagging. And tagging is something different. It's basically putting a category to a tag. And tagging works a little bit different than I would have expected. But in this case, we're putting the ID's value, so the ID's key. We put it in a tag, and we give it the categories or the tags admins and managers. So now it's stored inside the cache with these tags. And then we can get it from the tag, from the cache, using the ID, but we also have to provide the tag. So we have to say, we're looking into these tags, and then I want this key. So that way you can use the same key in different tags. But if you retrieve it and you pass the wrong tags, you don't get the correct answer back. So in this case, it needs to match all tags. So that's something that's important to understand with tagging. This, of course, goes wrong all the time with people doing this. Like, who makes this? I wouldn't build it like this. But anyway, so in this case, you need to be aware that if you put a cache or something inside the cache with a certain tag, you need to make sure that you use the same tags to retrieve it as well. And then you can also flush the tags. That's also a way to clear all the tags from the cache store. In this case, you can put in an array of all the tags or just pass in one tag. If you put in one tag, it will remove everything that has that tag. So in that way, at that point, it doesn't matter if you have one or more tags. So that's the confusing part about this. But both will clear all the full cache for admins in this case. So yeah. So that's something to keep in mind if you're working with Laravel and tagging. You probably don't use this very often because the normal cache, you can also prefix your cache key with something that makes it already its own category. So you probably don't need to use it a lot, but it's possible. And of course, there's a way to flush the whole cache, and that's just calling flush. So I've used the facade here all the time, but there's also a helper method called config, called cache. You can use that as well, so it's the same way. The cache method will refer to the same class that's behind this facade, so that works the same way. And you can also inject the cache store as well inside your controller or your class if you want to. But the facade works really good, so yeah, it's an opinion thing, I guess. Are there people against facades? No, let's not start the discussion. Let's do some code examples. Yeah, let's just dive in. So can I remove this? Where's my mouse? There. Let's see, mirror. Let's see, presentation mode. Where is it? Yeah, can you already see this? Okay, so we have a basic Laravel app here. Let me just open the app. So this is the basic Laravel app. I will probably zoom in later. And I have a routes file here, very basic routes file. So let's first start with countries. So basically I will be going over some code examples. There's no caching in here. We will add the caching. That's the basic idea. And we will do it on different ways. So one with tagging, one without tagging. We will use some ways to use certain keys and so on. So that's the basic idea behind this. If you have questions in between, just raise your hand or shout to me if I don't see you because I'm looking at my screen. And otherwise you can ask your questions at the end, of course, as well. Or doing drinks. That's fine too. You can buy me a beer. So we have a very simple countries class. Can everybody read this? Is it readable for everyone? Yeah. Okay, good. So we have a very simple countries list method and a countries Europe method. And basically it loops over this data array, and it's a lot of data, right? It's all the countries in the world are available here. And this is the kind of data you don't really access. If you access it a lot, you don't want to map over this set of data all the time. So it's perfect for a cache. You can just put it in the cache and it's perfectly fine in there. So in this case, it's mapping this list to a key value array. So if I would go to the countries array, yeah, so the countries. So this is very bright. Jeez. Okay, everybody can see this. So we have this very bright drop-down now with all the keys. And if we inspect this page, can we do that here? Just very quickly. Gee. It's so big and I still missed it. So maybe I can just up this up a little bit. So in here we have this. Okay, you can that's a little bit too much. So we have this value here. That's basically the alpha free key and the name. So this is just a basic list. So you can see it like a pluck method, right? So in this case we're looping over it and getting all this data, and we return a key value array back to this value. In this case, we basically want to remember this, right? We don't have to keep this in there. So we can just easily say cache, remember forever, because we don't want to clear it all the time. We just want to keep it here because the list is not going to change. And if it's going to change, then a new country is added. How often does that happen? So it's not an issue. We can just give it the key countries. So, and then because we do remember forever, we can just pass in a callback and put all our logic in here. So we just say return here, and then we return here. So this is the same thing. So if I now, let's see, I have this debug bar open. It now says 45 milliseconds, but now it's 9, right? It went from 45 to 9 because the cache is now here. So it doesn't have to do the calculation of the array all the time. So it's now already 20 milliseconds faster. And although this seems like a really small thing, if you do this for 100 things inside your application, it's a lot. So that's why it's important to use caching in this case. So let me just clear the cache. I have this, let's see, Redis clear. Flush all. So it's here. So if I do keys all, the array is empty. Just a little bit bigger. If I now refresh and get the keys again, it's empty. Oh, we didn't change the .env. It's gone again. Oh, it's Redis. Oh wait, I think I logged in with the wrong. No, that's not the Oracle. Wait, I remember. I should say It's something, yeah, select the one, that's the one. I have to select the correct database, basically, or the correct store in Redis. So keys all. So now I get this Laravel database, Laravel cache, countries. That's the key that's now stored inside the Redis thing. So Laravel database is basically the app name that it's retrieving from the configuration. And then it has a prefix called Laravel cache. That's something you can configure inside your config files. And then it uses our key. So now we can see it's actually inside Redis, so we can use it here. So if I refresh here, we get the fast times. If I flush it all again, it has to recalculate it the first time, and it's already fast. I just have a fast laptop, I guess. I should have used a bigger data set. Okay, but it was really slow the first time. But let's keep it on that. Okay, so back to countries. So for Europe, we have the same thing. So I have a page called Europe. Why is this so ugly? I think I added all the... okay, I already know. I don't have internet here. I have the CDN on for Tailwind. See, this is much better, right? Jeez. Okay. So we have a beautiful list here. But now these are all the countries in Europe. So this is a big list as well. But we can now add caching here as well. And in this case, we can basically use the same thing. But it's going to be a problem at some point that, let's see, I'm missing one here, this one. So, in this case, we want to make sure that we always return the countries of Europe. So in this case, we can just use a different way of adding a name here. So what's recommended with tag keys is to use a dot or some other mark to split it. And it's not recommended to use a dash, because most of the time if you have a string and you're going to convert it to a slug, for example, it's going to get a dash. So then you can't really figure out what category you put it in. So I normally use something like this to put it into there. So this way it's very clear that you're doing this. And you can even make this dynamic, right? We can even make this, for example, countries of a continent, and then pass in the continent, and then use that key to determine what you need to return. So I'm just going to keep it as this for now. We remember forever. And what you can do if you change this data set, or during your development cycle, for example, you're going to add a country, or you're using states, and there's a 51st state, for example, in America suddenly, then you have to change your data. And then on deploy, you just clear your cache, and the first person that hits the website for that person is going to be slow. But after that, the cache will be filled. And there are even ways to fill the cache, of course. You can pre-fill the cache, of course, to do that. Okay, so let's go to the next example. Okay, I think we did both of these. Yeah. Okay, so we have a user controller here. Let me just first show you the beautiful page. Oh, it's really big. Okay, so we have a table of users, and it's a lot of users, and we can search on them. So let's say I do hey, then I get this person back, right? And it's really simple. We just have this user query, and there's this magic happening. It's called a scope. So we have this when method. So when search is filled, then we apply this query as well. So in this case, we have search. So if we go to the user model, we have this scope search, and it will check if there is a query or if there is a search. In that case, we will check if it's correct string and move on from there. So then we do the checks if the name, email, and job are similar. So then we get this data back. So if I do hands, for example, I get one person back. Let's do, I don't know, J, will I get more numbers? No. Let's just remove the search and see what we get back. So let's do Will. I think there are more people with called Will. Yeah, there are 3 now. So the thing is with searches is that these are perfectly cacheable, because users in an application don't change that often. And if they change, you can easily clear the cache if you want to. So we're going to add some caching in here. So let's go back to the controller. So in here we can add the cache. So first of all, we have this search variable. And we need to do something with the search variable to make it really easy to work with. Because the search variables can be lowercase, uppercase, it can be a combination of the both. And basically you don't want to run the same query for uppercase and lowercase. You want to do that at once. So instead of using search, we can convert the search later to a slug, for example, and use that for the storage key. So let's make a key. And then we say string, there's this helper in Laravel called slug, and then we put in search. So basically the person that put in the search, we will still use that for searching, but we're going to use the key here to determine the caching. And since the users may change, we are not going to cache it forever. I've already have this calculation up here, it's 24 hours. So in this case, we'll just do cache remember, and then we have the key. And then we have the minutes, the data. So that is used in this case, but remember we have to put in the time. So we can just say self cache minutes and then the callback. Let's see. I'll just put it in here. And we will put in users is and return this instead. And we have to pass in search here, because it's a variable used, and we have to import cache, of course. And as you can see, the facade is imported here automatically. And that's it basically. So we retrieve the users here, and we don't want to do this all the time. So because remember here basically checks if the key exists and returns it if it exists, and otherwise it will call the callback. So now we are caching the search already. So if I'm going to retry this one, and I'm going to get the keys, then you can see that I already have this search based on will, which I just put in. But if I search on will with an, I can just do it here, will with an uppercase, and I get the keys, there's still one will. Because we already looked for it, for will, and we already stored that key here. And we know we're already doing a search in MySQL that does uppercase and lowercase matching. So we can just store the slug in there, and that's already enough for us. So what else can we do? Yeah. Okay. So I have a bigger example, and it's a blog. Let's go to. Yeah. So we have a set of posts here, and these have comments. So if there's a new comment, you of course want to see the new comment. In this case, you can't really click on a blog post. We just see the counter of the comment. So I'm just going to show you the counters. But that's already enough for us. So if I'm going to the blog controller, we have here all the posts that return the query. So it depends on the post how many comments they have. If I add a post, or if I go to, let's see, I'm just going to keep this one open. Let's see, I have this comments table. Let me just add a new comment for post ID 1. Yeah, it's visible. Let's go. So if I refresh here, okay, well it's not ordered in. I ordered it by publish date, so I'm not sure which one is the first one. Culpa is, let's see, that's ID 4. So if I change this to 4, remove this one, you can now see that the comments are free. If I now add caching and you add a comment, the block is cached, right? So if we add just regular caching here, cache, cache, remember, let's just do it forever for now. We call it block. And then we close this out, so. And then we have to import this. So now the block is cached, right? So if I now add or remove one, so if I remove that, oh, I made a mistake here for each. Return. Oh yeah, look at the return. Yeah, good. It's not cached, luckily. So if we now remove that comment, it should already be cached. We can see that in the store here. See, there's the block key. If I now refresh, the comments are still free because the blog post itself is already cached, and basically the whole query is cached, so we can't really access it anymore until the cache expires. But we said it will remember forever, so it won't expire until we clear the cache. So if I do, let's just do pp artisan cache clear. If we then refresh, we get to go back to 2 comments. The cache is gone. But also, if you see the keys here, it's all gone now. It's of course back because I refreshed. Okay, so what we basically want is that if a post is updated or something else is happening inside a comment for a post, for example, we want to clear this cache. So what we can do is we can go to the post model, and in here we can add a method called public, I think it's protected static function booted. And in here we can perform we can hook into model events. So we can say self-saving, and whenever a post is saved, so if it's updated or created, it doesn't really matter, then the event saving is fired, and we can use that event to determine if we need to do something. So in this case, we want to clear the cache. So we can just say cache forget block, right? So if we then, so we can save it here. So if I now go to PHP Artisan Tinker, we can get the first post. So post is post first. Does it work? Yeah. So post title is updated. So if we now check the cache, we still have this block, right? So I update the post, and then I say save. So now this event is fired. If we get the cache, it's empty. So we can use these model events to play around with our caches. And although this doesn't seem like a lot, it's really powerful already, because now you can just cache your whole block already, and just whenever something updates in the database through Eloquent, you can just clear the cache, and from there it will reload as well. So that's very nice. We get our comments back, so now we get updated here as well. That's really cool, but what happens if a comment is changed? How do we clear the cache then? We can either decide to clear the cache of block as well, but then we have 2 models that rely on the same cache key, and we don't really want that because the posts are leading in this, because the comments are part of a post. So what we can do is we can go to our comment, and Laravel has this a variable called touches. And touches basically means that whenever something changes on this model, I will call this model as well and say that I touched it, which basically means I will update the updated at. So in this case, I can say protected touches, and I can pass in an array of the relationships. So in this case, post. So if I now check the keys, we have the block, right? So now let's grab the post comments first. I probably have to assign it. So now we have a comment, and let's just say go away. Update. It's really hard typing this way. Test. Let's just do it like that. Yeah, I know, it's correct. I know. I didn't press enter. No, you did. Oh, it's not fillable. Okay, fair enough. Jeez. Let's go. Jeez. Oh no, I have to restart the session, I guess. Jeez, man. First I have to get the post. Jeez, we can do it really quick. It should work now, right? Yes, it worked. Okay, so you probably don't know if the cache is now cleared or not, but it's cleared. It's not cleared. Why is it not cleared? Okay, let's check. So we have touches, post. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Okay, I think I refreshed in between. Goodbye. Is it now fired? Okay, let's just clear the cache. just to be sure. Okay, well, I'm not going to put time into this because I have better examples now. But the idea behind this is that you can make something controllable about a cache, right? You can make the model owner give that model ownership of that cache and make it clear something. So in this case, post will clear something for us. In this case, when it's saved. And if you then update a child relationship, that can basically ping the parent and then do something from there. So that's a concept that you can use as well for clearing your caches. Yeah, what we can also do, since we're already caching the whole thing anyway, what we can do is we can cache the view. That's really nice. So we can say the view is this. And instead of just returning it, we can render it. So it will render now the whole blade template. And then we can just say return. Oh, we can just put it in the cache and return view. So return view. And we just say cache. Yeah, we just put the key block. Let's just call it view. And then we put the view in there. So we can put the view in there and then we'll return view. That's correct, right? String. Is this correct? Not sure if this works. Wait. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here. Let me just double check in my history. What did I do wrong? Did it right?
The return type in your function. Line 12.
Is there a return? No, this doesn't return.
No, you return a string. You're not returning a view.
The invoke function.
What should return? Okay. Wait. I have to figure it out because I'm sure this works.
Line 12 at the end. Yeah. You're expecting to return a view. Okay.
This one, yeah. But if I just return the string, then it's not gonna. Oh, okay, it works. Okay. Wait, what? Okay. So we now put the view inside the cache. What else was that? MacBook, don't. Don't do this to me. So let's see what's in the cache, right? So let's get all the keys. So now we have this block view in here. So we have the full page view here. So you can probably delete that when you deploy something, so you can clear that. So what's important is that Laravel uses Blade, right? And it already has caching built in. So because it already caches the views itself. So it stores the PHP file that's being rendered from Blade inside your storage here. So storage, I think it's framework views. So you get the whole rendered page here with all the PHP in there. So it basically looks like this. What we do with actually rendering the view is that we actually cache the generated HTML instead of the PHP. So it's a lot faster than doing this. So basically you have a static website now with this. And you can of course, with this block control, it's a really simple example, but you can easily make a wrapper around this to do it for all the pages that you have that don't have a lot of dynamic data. So that's it. Okay, I have one more. I have time, right? Yeah. That's okay. Okay, let's go to web.php again. I finally have this orders controller, and I would like to go to /orders. So this is where caching is really nice, and that's when you work with statistics, right? Because statistics are mostly generated every night, or you don't need them live most of the time. Because there are very heavy calculations on the backend, and you don't really need that. So in this case, I have this viewer that shows you the last 15 days, the last 30 days, or the last 5 days. But we have different keys here, so we can work with that. So let me just open up the orders controller. And in here we have this class. We have basically a simple class that does stuff for us. And as you can see here, so this is also a very nice concept of caching. Don't make your controller do the caching, because the controller can do the caching, which is really nice, but then there's a lot of logic inside the controller. And if you want to reuse certain data, then it's really nice if this caching data is available somewhere else. So in this case, we have this class that's now the owner of this data, but it can also be the owner of the cache. So from there, you can clear the cache, or you can put something in the cache and work from there. So in this case, we have a status per day, and we get a days object. That's an enumeration from PHP 8.1. So this is something that's available in 8.1. So in this case, we have 5, 15, and 30. So we build up a carbon period, we get all the orders, we group them by the status, and then do a sum of those results, and then return the results to an array. So what we can do is we can basically add caching for every day, right? So in this case, we can say cache put. And now we're going to use the syntax again. So I'm just going to build up a key above here to make it readable. So we have the days. And then we just put in the day itself and then the value from it. Or we can also put in, let's just do the name. That's more readable. So from here we can just say put the key in here. Did I have the seconds here? No. So what's also a thing to make it more readable about what amount of minutes you're using, for example, you can also say certain words like 1 hour. So this is a lot more readable, and then you just have to add this constant here. So public const is 60. So 1 hour is 60 minutes, and then we put the data in here for, I think I'm using the wrong order here. So put requires you, the values first. So the totals it is. So that's it. So now we built up this cache, and we have two ways. We can either wrap this in a remember or remember forever method and then return it from there, but it's not going to be readable here. So instead we can just use it above here, and we just say if cache has key, then we just return that key. Return cache get key. So that's it. So this will always return that array. So it's already a lot faster now because it only has to do the calculations once. So if I update to 30 or 15, and then we look inside the cache, we can now see that we have, for each cache, we have a number here. So that's very nice. But what if we want to clear this data, right? So let's go to the order model. And we can use the same principle here as well, right? We have this static saving method again, and we can from here clear the cache. So in this case, we know we have an enum, right? And that has multiple values. So we can say for each enum as, I think it's days. Cases as day. So then we get the full day, but then we need to clear this key again. So how do we get this key, right? We're stuck with this key now, and we used this key before, but now we don't have a key anymore. So now we're going back to this one. We have to build up this key. What's this? Annoying. So we can either add a method here and make the key available. There are other ways to do it as well, but we can use tags here instead. So instead of using this days key here and then looping over all the enumerations that we have and then keep remembering what the tag is, we can just clear the whole space with the tags. So instead of doing this, we're just going to say tags, and we just call days and then put. So just have to make sure that there's no code in here. So if we refresh now, and let's say we do 5 days as well, if we then look inside the cache, we can now see that there is this hash thing, and that's basically the category that we assign it, the tag that we assign it. So that's why, because it's basically an MD5 of the string, because of that, that's why you need both of the tags to make sure that you can get the actual value. But since we have this value now, we don't have to loop over this anymore. We can just remove this, and instead we can just say cache tags, in this case days, and then flush. And of course I have to import this. So this way we can now also clear the cache very easily from there, instead of doing it all the time, doing this for each loop, for example, or clearing the whole cache. Okay. Let's see. Let me just go back to my presentation. I have 1 or 2 more slides, and then to use a separated monitor. So, important reminders. If you I think Sander's going to talk about service providers. Do know that caching is not available inside the service provider because it's not being booted yet by the framework, so you don't have access to it, just like the database layer. Yeah, and tags don't work with the default driver. So if you have a local driver, and local driver stores basically the cache inside a file, or you can store it inside an array, so it then will be session based. In that case, the tags don't work because there's no way to store that pre-part, I guess. So instead, if you want to use tags, you have to use a driver like Redis, like I did, or you can use memcached, those kind of tools that are actually made for caching. They're built to do caching. And if I had this a lot of times, if you're doing development and something is wrong and you can't figure out why, just clear the cache. Maybe something is stuck inside the cache. So that's a really nice way to put it, I guess. So does anybody of you ever used caching? And oh, I see there's some hands. Yeah. Do you have any experience you want to share, or we can talk about it later? But I see some low. You have tough experiences?
No, tough experience.
Okay.
We use caching.
Nice. Okay. So I guess that's it for me now. We're going to watch Sander for his talk about package development. So very excited about that.
Yeah.
And I think.
So actually, if you do have any questions. Sorry. So actually, if you do have any questions, then now is the time to ask. We will have like 5 more minutes for a little Q&A with Bobby, and then we'll have a short break. Fresh fries from our sponsor are delivered, so I hope there's a little bit of room there. And afterwards, we will continue with Sander. So do you have any questions? No one. So
yeah, that's the question.
What's your opinion about cache warmers?
I think they're powerful, I guess. Cache warmer. So the question is, what's my opinion about cache warmer? So a cache warmer is basically like we clear the cache, but basically you pre-fill it. So all the methods that you call, for example, all the queries, you just make sure that you call the queries before you deploy your website or whatever. I think it can be really powerful. I think the most things we do with Laravel with caching, it's mostly calculations, that kind of stuff. You probably don't need to warm them up. So. If you have a really big data set, then it might be useful, but yeah, it should probably be part of your deployment step then, like an extra step that runs some commands that fills that cache, I guess. Yeah, good question.
Is there a maximum in terms of data size?
Depends on the storage you use.
Okay. For example, Redis?
Yeah, Redis has its own limits. I think it depends on how much, because Redis stores something inside the CPU or on the memory. So it's basically how big is your memory. That's how much you can store. Yeah. So good question, though. Okay. Well, let's have.
If there are no other questions, then thank you, Bobby.
Let's have fries.